you recently praised NVIDIA and AMD's strict limits on factory overclocks. I don't remember the exact context of that, do you?
That would have been around the Intel Power discussion, I think, around the validation of certain power limits and things that was being done.
Oh, yeah, that might have been at Computex.
Yeah.
But these brands also restrict the voltages and power available for manual overclocking. Radeon even hard limits clock speeds. Do you agree those are bad for consumers? I mean, they're bad for overclockers. Whether they're bad for consumers at large, I don't necessarily think so. I mean, ultimately, it would be great to have the product stable and well defined out of the box. Like you're getting the most out of the product without going to or beyond the point of diminishing returns. You're not compromising stability. It just works. That's ultimately what you want as the out of the box experience. And then, it'd be great to have the freedom to tune and do whatever you want. But at the same time, there has to be enforced safety limits, like known safety limits. If you apply this much voltage, that's deemed excessive voltage and will kill the chip quite rapidly, if not instantly. So you don't want those sort of situations either. You still need some defined limits, or it has to be very difficult to override those limits for those that are using like liquid nitrogen or whatever. So I'm all for it being highly customizable and tunable, but you also don't want people who are getting into overclocking, novice overclockers or whatever, blowing up their parts because they didn't realize you couldn't make this adjustment or whatever. And we haven't really been seeing that either.
I think you run into issues with GPU overclocking where people try and pin overclocking related issues on the manufacturer. So if you've pushed your GPU too far and you're getting black screens or artifacts or system crashes or whatever, you might blame that on the driver as opposed to the overclock that you've done, which, companies are very protective of their reputation around drivers, especially after that's affected, say, AMD's drivers for a long time. So companies are not willing to sort of go, well, you can do whatever you want, but, we don't really want the blowback of you overclocking your CPU or GPU too far and then having issues and then either RMAing products and trying to go through that process when it's kind of your fault for killing your product, or having issues that they're then attributed to things that are not really the company's fault. It's more the user's fault. So I think that's why we've seen GPU overclocking being limited, because there was a time when you'd buy a GPU and basically there was like a 20% performance margin there, and most people would be experimenting with overclocking. As time's gone on, if you're looking for those 20% gains, you kind of have to do very extreme things that are not going to be stable. So if you're trying to apply this sort of, you can always overclock a GPU, and then now you try and do those similar overclocks and it's really not an optimal experience anymore, then people are going to be complaining about stability and, why can't I overclock this? I always used to be able to do it, and now you're saying I can't anymore. So I think that plays into why there's limits for those parts. And how often have we seen, CPU crashes and things being attributed to, not with the Intel side of things, but my game crashed, and that wasn't the overclock. Surely that was the game I was playing, or that was the drivers or the memory or something. When it was actually just you were running your configuration unstable. So it's a tricky one. I think companies are trying to avoid that, and really, I think a lot of the time these days there's just not enough headroom to justify significant overclocking limits. They're pretty well tuned out of the box these days for maximum performance.